Hello and welcome, I'm Arumba, thank you for joining me. This is Arumba's Assay for EU4. This is a Portugal save submitted by a very new player. It's his very first save game ever. It was submitted by a gentleman named Sava61. He says that he has always watched EU4 videos, especially my videos, and decided to get the game with the Humble Bundle sale. Everybody advised him to get the Common Sense and Art of War DLC, so that's what he started with. He decided to try playing as Portugal first, since the game said that they were good for beginners. And he thought that a good achievement would be to go after trying to create a colony in Florida. He says that he's not very good at the game. He's played CK2 and EU4, Hearts of Iron 4, and while he's not an expert, he understands the mechanics behind those. However, in this game, he has struggled to have a good economy. His income is very low. He's tried building churches to receive more tax funds. His main rivals are Morocco and Tunis, and also he thinks Castile, except that they're also his allies, so he's not really sure. So he's not sure if they count or not. So far, he did get Gibraltar from Granada, so he won a war, right? He's not a brand new player. So I want to preface this episode by just saying that I think that it's worthwhile to take a look at brand new saves as well, brand new player saves, rather than just doing like the higher end sophisticated, like, you know, micro, like crazy stuff, and just answer like basic overarching questions. And it's also tough when you join the game, like you start playing the game and you don't have every single DLC. There are a lot of mechanics that you may have seen used in YouTube videos and be like, well, where's my button? So what I've done is I've loaded up the save with just the 2 DLCs that he has, and we're gonna take a look at the situation and try to play our way through the problems. So the last thing that he had to say was just that he thinks that this game is lost, and he does not know what really constitutes a loss in the game. He just really knew how to develop the economy and how he could get better income, because it's really rough to only have 1 ducat a month. So let's talk about a few things. First things first. Part of your problem, sir, is that you are in a Peasants' War. Peasants' War is awful, and it can be very difficult to play through if you have not experienced it before. This is a disaster. Disaster is a series of bad events that can strike your country in times of turmoil. When the starting conditions are fulfilled, the disaster will begin to progress up a monthly tick, and then once it happens, you're then in the disaster. Only 1 disaster can fire at a time, so you don't have to worry about the Civil War or the aristocratic coup firing, because we are in the Peasants' War. We need to end the Peasants' War pretty damn badly, because this thing is what's making your country, like, really hard to play right now. The Peasants' War will end when there are fewer rebel-controlled provinces than 1, and you have stability of at least 1. Part of the problem, though, is that the Peasants' War gives an effect called Stability Cost Modifier plus 50%. So to buy our stability up costs 140 points. This is very punishing. I mean, just do the math, right? We need to get to positive 1 stab before we can end the Peasants' War, and until then, we have national unrest plus 5? I mean, holy smokes. Each point of stab is going to cost us 140 points? 140 times 3? That's 420 points, minus the 23 that we have, divided by the rate that we gain them of 4? You're telling me it's going to take 99.25 months, also known as 100 divided by 12 equals 8.5 years? Yeah, that's a long time. It's going to be very difficult to deal with that. So, what I'm going to do is, the very first thing we're going to do, I'm going to recommend we just accept the rebels' demands. This is unfortunately going to be the easiest way to solve this problem, and we just have to do it. Sometimes you just have to accept the demands of your rebels. We can't possibly get our way out of this easier, in any easier way that I've found. So the advantage to accepting their demands is that we will end the Peasants' War right now. There goes 5 national unrest. The disadvantage is that we will lose 50 prestige twice for some reason, but we're already at negative 91. So it doesn't really matter. You know, we're really only losing 9 prestige. Just think of it that way. We're going to gain 20% local autonomy in most of the country. Oh well, that's fine. Getting rid of the national unrest minus 5 is far more important, because if you look at our country, we have unrest basically everywhere, primarily because of the negative stab, but also because of the Peasants' War and low legitimacy. So we're just going to accept their demands, and these guys are they're going to go away. And we are now done with that. So let's just have them not siege our capital anymore. Now, one of the things that is kind of nice about your capital is that your capital can never actually have autonomy above 0%. So even though it said we're going to gain 20% autonomy in every province, we didn't actually gain any in our capital, and the Peasants' War is, as I mentioned, completely done and gone. So now, to boost our stab, we no longer have this threshold where we have to get to positive 1. We only have to get to 0 before a lot of the bad stuff will go away. That's much more attainable because it now only costs 100 points each. So at 100 points each, just to get back to 0 would cost us, 100 minus the 23 points that we have, plus an extra 100 because we've got to do it twice. We need 177 points. divided by the 4 that we gained. It's only going to take 44 months, which is about 3.5 years. Much better. But still, there's some other things here economically that we can do to try to help sort and like right this ship. I want to take some time to talk about loans in EU4 and why they are awful if you can avoid them. Paradox loves doing really squirrely math. I think they're like practically famous for it. This is the only game in the history of games I've ever played where there is a variable rate interest rate on base mechanics like interest on loans. When you take out a loan in EU4, the interest rate is by default 4% at 5 years. But for some strange reason, Paradox likes variable interest rates, and when you take out a loan and then your interest changes because, say, for example, your stability goes negative, all of a sudden the interest on all of the old loans goes up to the new interest rate. So when we look at our interest rate here, they're all at 6%. For this reason, you pretty much never want to pay off loans when you have negative stab because you're paying extra. If your interest rate's 6% at 5 years, you're paying 35%, right? 30%. 30% of the principal. You're losing 30% of whatever money you borrow up front over the course of the loan. And when you pay off a loan in EU4, you also pay off all the interest ahead of time. If you take out a loan today and you pay off the whole thing tomorrow, you still have to pay all of the interest. That's not how most loans work, not in real life, but that's how they work in this game. So basically, the thing that we're running into right this second is actually that our interest rate and the amount of interest we're owing each month is so high that we're actually not even coming out ahead. This is a time where we might want to consider declaring bankruptcy to just get rid of the loans and not have to deal with coming back from this. Now, I don't think we're going to need to do that, and I'd prefer to not do that. I'm going to shift consolidate, by the way, these troops. We do want to keep that infantry around, but we are also on negative manpower, and I'd like to try to salvage some economy here. We're going to take our maintenance down to 0 because we just can't afford them. We can't afford to have our troops at all. We're going to try to do everything we can to avoid rebels and every problem that we can. These guys are at 90%. What we can do is we could do harsh treatment if we do get a few more military points, or we could just accept their demands too. Gain another 20% local autonomy in the entire country sounds pretty awful, but if we know for sure we can't beat these rebels, it might be the best course of action. Lastly, we have the Moroccan separatists in Ceuta. We're going to want to raise autonomy in this province to try to mitigate that unrest as best that we can. We have negative 100 prestige now, 0 legitimacy. What else can we do? All right, let's go down my list of stuff. So our net income now is at 4.21 ducats a month, which does exceed our interest rate. So I do think we can crawl out of this. It'll take a little while, but it'll also look better after we get our stability back up. So let's talk about some of the other economic actions and things that we can do to sort of right the ship. The game does say that we owe 444 ducats. I think it's worth mentioning that this is not the total actual number you owe. If you take the time to add these numbers up, the actual amount of money that we owe is bigger. We owe 537 ducats and 98 cents because the interest rate is not factored into that tooltip. So again, don't pay off loans if you can avoid it while you have negative stab, so you can avoid the extra interest, but just be aware that you actually owe more than what it actually says. So, if you were to declare bankruptcy, what would happen is your stability would get set down. You'd lose 3 stab. You'd lose all your prestige. You'd lose like 100 prestige. All your monarch points do get set down to negative 100 and have to crawl back from there. It does wipe all of your debt, which is good, but it also has a lot of other things like it'll delete all of your units in training, cancel all of your cores, cancel all of your culture conversion in progress. It will delete any building you've built in the last 5 years. In fact, it'll even delete buildings you've upgraded in the last 5 years, even though you paid for the initial building. So there's like a lot of downsides to it. I don't think I'm going to try to play to do the bankruptcy, but it is something to consider. Also, for the purposes of right now, we're going to mothball these 2 forts. By turning them off, we can save another ducat a month. We're going to leave this one on just because we don't have a truce with Morocco, and I don't trust him to not declare war on us. Next up, I want to talk about what I consider or call the economy of actions. Like, basically, we have a lot of unused actions that we could be doing right now. We have a colonist, we have 3 diplomats, and we have a missionary. In general, you want to be using every action as often as you can. It's as if we're not utilizing some of our income by not using these actions. So with a diplomat, if you don't know what to do with him, just have him improve relations with somebody, anybody, or have him fabricate a claim, build a spy network. We only have, right now, 2 possible casus belli. We've got a Conquest CB on Castile, because we have a CB on Extremadura and Sevilla, and we have a Conquest CB on... No, we don't even have Conquest on Morocco. We just have Humiliate Rival. So we don't really have a lot of options. So let's start off with this. We're going to build a spy network on Morocco and on Granada. And we're going to improve relations with the Pope. Why the Pope? Because the Pope is, he's kind of a big deal. We're Catholic. This is our main, the main function of our religion is interacting with the Pope and developing papal influence. Our papal influence generation is generated based on base value 0.5, and then we get points for having more cardinals, and then we have random events like cardinal and administration and things. But basically, we want the Pope to be happy with us, because the more he likes us, the more papal influence we generate. And right now we're going to turn to the Pope to try to solve some of our bankruptcy issues. We have these interactions that we can do. We can levy a church tax for national tax modifier plus 15. We can use yearly legitimacy plus 1. We can forgive usury to get yearly inflation reduction plus 0.1 and interest per annum minus 0.25. We can do a papal legate for an extra diplo rep, yearly prestige plus 1, stability plus 1, proclaim holy war, and sanction commercial monopoly for plus 1 mercantilism. Now, the two that I think are the absolute best in this set of buttons are levy church tax, because money is almost everything in this game. You can drive almost everything with just pure money. This is a very, very good click, lasts for 20 years, and it's going to increase national tax modifier by 15%. Right now, that's the vast majority of our income, so that'll give us a pretty big edge. Right now, we're at 5.82. Let's go ahead and levy church tax, and now we're at 6.36. Suddenly, our economy is looking kind of okay. Now, we still have 60 papal influence to spend, and while forgiving usury might be tempting, the interest per annum reduction's kind of not that useful, because ideally, we don't want to have loans in the first place. So whether the interest rate's 4 or 3.75 makes no difference, because we don't want loans, because that means we're wasting money. However, there is the side effect yearly inflation reduction plus 0.1, and this effect lasts for 20 years, so it also effectively buys you -2 inflation. 2 inflation is worth about 75 admin points based on the reduce inflation button. So that is kind of nice, but since it takes 20 years, and there are 12 months per year, we're effectively getting 75 admin points over the course of 240 months, or about 0.3 monarch points a month. It's not that much, really. It's kind of nice, but not that great. Instead, I'm actually going to recommend we take the Bless Ruler modifier, because Prestige is another reason why we're having so many problems. Prestige affects morale of armies, which makes you have a hard time fighting other enemies. It also affects global trade power, which reduces our trade income. And it also affects things like your aggressive expansion impact and the improved relations, which is how fast negative modifiers come back, and also how quickly positive modifiers are increased. So when we look at like the Pope, we are only able to improve his relations with us by 1.53 per month, because we are so low on prestige. If we had positive prestige right now, we could be increasing by 3, 4, 5 opinion per month, basically making every diplomat we own much, much better. So, basically that's where we're at so far. We've spent our papal influence. One thing we could consider is we could spend just 5 papal influence to have a chance at becoming the Curia controller. This is like a little mini game that you play as a Catholic. I do think you should pretty much click this every time you see a pop-up saying the Pope has died, because otherwise you have no chance of becoming the Curia controller. It can never happen. So now we have a 6.2% chance of being the next papal Curia controller. Essentially, our cardinal will become the Pope. When that happens, we get these benefits. Stability cost -10, diplomats +1, yearly prestige +1, advisor cost -20, more advisors to choose from, tech cost -5, extra leader without upkeep, and aggressive expansion impact -20. For only 5 papal influence, I feel like it's worth taking that risk most of the time. Now, I do think that we might want to just disband this infantry. I'm going to waste 100 manpower just because we don't really want to have to use that many troops. We need to make as much money as possible, and we need to start getting our stability to be paid off. Now, as for stability, why didn't we take the stab button? Because this is a variable monarch point value click. When you go from -2 to -1, you're effectively getting this many monarch points. 100. If you go from -1 to 0, you're still going to get 100. You go from 0 to 1, you're still going to get 100 effective admin points. When you go from 1 to 2, you're actually getting 150 admin points. And when you go from 2 to 3, you're getting effectively 200 admin points. So this click is good, but it's best when you can use it when you're already on a high stab. And you kind of prefer to use it in that circumstance and rather spend monarch points when you are on low stat. Granted, we are in kind of a dicey position here, so it might have been an acceptable option to go with, but I do feel like the economy and the prestige are both going to help out quite a bit. Okay, we should try to use colonists. We have a lot of debt. I do think there's a good chance, though, that we still would end up making a profit by using the colonist. It's kind of more of a dice roll here, though. If you want to just pay off your loans before trying to colonize, that would also be an acceptable route of going. So we might consider doing that for now. We have 2 troops over here that are kind of hanging out on a potential province in Barbados. Looks to me like he was considering trying to colonize here. I'm going to go ahead and say for now that we're not going to do that. We only have 2 transports. Apparently everything else died in a previous war. Let's just use auto transport to bring our troops home. We want to get them all together so we can fight whatever we have to fight. We've been having a very, very hard time with economy and with monarch point generation. We have no advisors. I can see why he couldn't afford them. Production efficiency guy, colonial range spy network, and force summit fort defense. Yeah, we really can't justify any of those. King Diego I d'Avis is awful. Like, really, really bad. 3 monarch points. Monarchs can range from 0 monarch points all the way up to 18 monarch points if you have a 666. So this guy's like at the very bottom of the spectrum with only 3. For that reason alone, I would consider making him into a commander, because if we can get him to die, that'd be great. He's awful. Our heir is slightly better, has a 3-2-1, 6 monarch points, but King Diego, he needs to die. He needs to die as soon as possible. All right, talking about merchants. We have a merchant in Sevilla who is currently collecting 1.68 ducats a month. I mentioned how prestige is drastically impacting our ability to collect trade. We have negative 15% prestige modifier to our trade power. We'll do what we can to make it come back, but notice in that tooltip it says no transfer bonus due to merchant collecting in Ivory Coast. Generally speaking, only try to collect trade in one node. Until you know more about what you're doing, don't risk trying to collect in more than one node. It's complicated, and it's much simpler to just transfer trade power from every node other than the node that's your capital. In fact, based on our current situation, I think we'd probably be better off also transferring trade from another node as well. Because every node that you steer from, every node that you're transferring in, gives you an increase in your total amount of trade power. See now how we have transfer from Ivory Coast plus 10%? Now that I'm sending the merchant from Sevilla to Safi, we're actually going to get another 10% because we have 2 merchants now who are transferring from different nodes. You automatically collect in your home node. You don't need to put a merchant there. The only thing that having the merchant in Sevilla does is gives us 2 more trade power for having a merchant present. Notice how right here it says for Castile, 2.0 merchant present, and we just lost the 2.0 because I sent the merchant away. You get 2 trade power, and then you also do get an extra 10% collect bonus. On Castile, it says affecting actual income, merchant present plus 10, technology, burgers. We don't have the merchant present, but I would rather take something to offset this malice to our trade power, and we're going to send the merchant over to Safi to make that happen. Next, we can use estate interactions to try to gain some cash. Looks like the player who submitted the save did already try taking for they took a contribution from the burgers. Unfortunately, they did it when the burgers have no influence. You get money relative to the power of the estate, so if they only have 5% influence, we barely got any money at all. 35 ducats might seem like a lot when you're broke, but it's actually really, really weak, and we would want to give them some more influence before we click that button. Also, there's really no penalty whatsoever when you're already at negative 100 prestige to spending 5 prestige, so we might as well do that. And here we can send an emissary to the Pope, get 10 more papal influence, we can establish New World missions, recruit an Inquisitor, make a contribution. Here, again, we'll spend 5 prestige because we're not actually spending prestige, since we're already at negative 100. I do think we should probably grant a generalship and look to revoke some of the land from the nobles if possible. I'd possibly like to also get some military tech. Unfortunately, we're on tech 5, while our neighbors are on tech 7, 7, and 7. Even Granada's on tech 7, so we're kind of really behind on mil tech right now, which is also a big disadvantage. So I think what we'll do next is let's go ahead and grant generalship. And then we're going to demand 200 military points from them. And then we're going to start revoking some of their provinces. So long as they have not red loyalty, they're above 40%. revoking one province is not going to make them disloyal, and that's a good thing. This province here has 54.3% autonomy after the Peasants' War type stuff that we had to deal with. Unfortunately, the nobles don't give you any bonuses to taxes or production, so if we can, we're going to revoke this from the clergy, and we're going to revoke this from the nobles. We're then going to turn around and grant Porto to the burghers, because the burghers need influence, and the burghers want provinces that have estuaries. Now, the one drawback to what I just did is that we did just raise the autonomy by 25%, but burghers will reduce the penalties for production and trade power to 0%. So even though we have higher autonomy, it doesn't actually matter because they are in control of this province. So we can have an 80% autonomy province with full production income and full trade power. Right here, we're going to go up to 37.4 trade power now in that state, or that province, which is going to drastically impact the amount of overall trade income we make, right? Last month we made 1.68. Let's go ahead and play the game for a little bit and just see where we end up next month. All right, so we end up making now 3.18 ducats in trade. Our net income is 5.41. We do still have 2 provinces down here that are unassigned to estates. And Evora is at 0% autonomy, and this is at 69.8% autonomy. Coimbra does not have any estuary. The vast majority of the income is coming from taxes. I'd probably go ahead and give this to the clergy instead of the nobles. We had to revoke at least one province from the nobles in order to get rid of their potential disaster, but I also needed those military points to try to catch up on military tech. By granting it now to the clergy, they are going to reduce the autonomy penalty from 70% down to effectively 0% on our taxes. So this province will now make us a fair bit of actual cash, 0.6 ducats a month. That'll start affecting us next month. And down here in Ceuta, again, there is no trade or anything. However, this province is owned by the Sunni, and we want to eventually get that converted. So let's go ahead and grant this to the clergy as well. And let's grant this one to the clergy as well. Now they have 84% influence. They're not mad. I want to give one more province to the burghers so we can get their influence a little bit higher. In fact, they're now at 41%, which allows us to do their other clicks, which I'm excited about. I was considering raising the development here so that they are grantable. Let's see, the Azores has no autonomy. What else can we do for the moment? All right, start off by granting admiralship to get their influence up another 20 points, getting our trade efficiency multiplier a little bit higher. We're then also going to do grant noble charter to get their influence to 76. And then we can immediately turn around and demand 150 Diplo points, which will get us... They're still happy, but more importantly, when the cooldown is gone for ask for contribution, notice how now it's 112 ducats because they're now influential. Hopefully some of those choices and decisions there made sense. At this point, we could keep on trying to power through ideas, but I actually feel like we are in such economic dire straits that it might not be a bad idea to do a little bit of development to get some cash. Every development click that we do will make us more money and more production in the long run. We only have the 2 DLCs, so we don't have things like prosperity. We can't exploit development. I mean, there's a lot of mechanics that are missing right now. We are over the leader limit now, so something to consider would be to fire. Let's see, both these guys are the ones that we just hired. We got a 2-3-2-1 from the nobles, and a 1-1-3 is what we had before. Let's go ahead and appoint the guy we got from the nobles. We'll fire this one and this one, so we're not over the limit, costing us military points. All right, let's just check on autonomy again. If we wanted to, we could just revoke every province from the nobles at this point and grant them to either the clergy or the burghers in order to get money. The nobles being upset is not that big of a deal. We miss out on some manpower recovery speed and land maintenance modifier. It's not nearly as big of effect, though, as having the clergy and the burghers loyal. So let's go ahead and play for a little bit. One other thing to consider is that smart wars are profitable. So there's another action economy type thing we could use. We only have 2 rivals set. We've got Morocco and Tunis. If we rival Granada, that will give us a potential casus belli against him, which we didn't have before. We could declare a humiliate war on Granada and actually go to war just to make money. Now, we'd have to beat someone whose military tech is 2 levels higher than ours, so it's not really what I would consider to be a smart war, but I just felt like it's important to mention that smart wars are profitable. Gaining clay, even just taking money, is incredibly profitable. I'm kind of concerned about this 7.1 and 2.1 unrest chance here. We've got unrest in Algarve. The clergy, okay, that's showing controlled by the clergy +5. That's not actually correct, because the clergy are no longer upset. Just needs a month update. Let's do this. Let's take our maintenance back up to full, so that we can have a little bit of unrest reduction. Each regiment at full maintenance will reduce unrest by 0.25 in whatever province the regiment is sitting in, based on the DLC that we have. We don't have Dharma, so we can't use autonomous suppression. But we can park the army. Oh no! England has cancelled our subsidies. So England, our ally, had been trying to support us in the previous war, and he canceled the subsidies. That's rough. I was hoping he'd pay us for a while, but that's okay. So by parking the army here, we have 2.5 province unrest reduction. And it should show, beginning next month, friendly troops -2.5. Fortunately, we don't have any war exhaustion, but we've got to get this stability paid off. There's the friendly troops -2.5. That's one less province that has any unrest. The potential rebels, the size of the rebellion is based on the development of the provinces that have the unrest. So by knocking Algarve off the list, we've made the potential rebellion a little bit smaller. Base size, you can see, is 4. Lisboa is 4. Evora is 2, and the Azores and Madeira add 1. So actually, we should probably try to focus on getting rid of the unrest in our capital, since it is the largest development province, rather than Algarve at only 8 development. Right now we have an embargo on Morocco, but no embargo on Granada. We'd like to get our power projection up. That also helps out with a lot of different mechanics. Let's come back from, let's say Morocco for a second and embargo Granada. And our other rival was who again? Morocco, Tunis. Let's go ahead and get an embargo on Tunis. We have a truce with them right now. Okay, fair enough. We have not condemned slavery anymore. And it looks like our explorer just died. We did have 2 troops that just arrived from the transports. For now, let's just mothball the ships so we can save the maintenance cost. It's not much, but, well, no, that's such a minor amount, I'm not even going to consider it. Okay, we still have arrest in Evora. We have none in Porto. All Lord Heretics now are only upset in 3 provinces. So the size of the rebellion got reduced down to 11k. The Moroccan separatists are upset in Ceuta with 1.1. So what we could actually do is make at least one of these rebellions go away by parking 5 regiments in Ceuta for a while. But I'm a little worried that this rebellion could fire. For 90%, it's just very concerning. All we have to do is make it to the point where we can buy stab by 1. And right now there is a 6% chance each month that it's going to fire. Taking a colonist right now sounds appealing, sure. We do get goods produced plus 10%, but it's not actually going to really benefit us because we can't even use the colonists that we have. On the other hand, taking Diplotech could theoretically give us some advantages, or possibly doing more development would give us some advantages. We also have this institution penalty because we don't have the Renaissance. We need to embrace the Renaissance as soon as possible. And again, we don't want to pay off the loans if possible while we have the negative stab. So we want to just kind of stockpile our cash, then pay off stability twice. In fact, I think we can even go speed 5 and just hope that this rebellion doesn't fire. If we can get to the point where we can raise stab 1 time, and I think we can get through this just fine. We can also get a claim on Granada and a claim on Morocco. We also have our mission tree to consider. Total navy size at force limit, colonizing West Africa we have done. Settle in Central Africa. gain Congolese ambitions. So own at least one fully colonized province in the Congo region. Game wants us to try to colonize down here somewhere. That's slightly out of our colonial range at the moment, but we could try to colonize down here. Oh, it's so tempting to try to colonize because I know that there is profit in doing it. It's just that we need to pay off our loans. Got to improve relations with our neighbor a little bit. Let's try to get a second claim on Morocco. Papal State has just rivaled Castile. Interesting. Couple more months. Couple more months of luck. Let that 6% dice roll not actually happen. Alright. There goes a little bit of national unrest. That's actually 2 unrest. The benefits for being at positive stab are -1 unrest. The benefits, or the penalties for being on negative unrest are 2 unrest. Negative stability is -2 unrest. Or +2 unrest in every province. It's a lot. So just by going up in 1 stab, we've just lost the unrest in Morocco, the Moroccan separatists, and now we're down to 0.1 in Madeira, Evora, and the Azores. The Azores are over here. So let's go ahead and auto-transport a single unit to the Azores. And then let's find the other 2. We've got Madeira and Evora. We can now take a single regiment to Evora. And we can get a single regiment over onto Madeira as well. Let's actually dock that guy up, split in half. Auto-transport one guy to there. And auto-transport the other guy to the Azores. And now we can see the Lollard Heretics are going to start to decline. And in about 8 months, we can then lower maintenance and focus all of our effort on trying to turn this debt around. I think what I'll do then is I'm going to take a short break here. And in the next episode, we're just going to continue to play this out for a bit and just see if we can right the ship for him. All right, thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you soon.